Hello everyone. In 1533, the Spanish conquistador Francisco Pizarro executed the Inca leader Atahualpa. And Atahualpa's execution was not only a blow to the political sovereignty of the Inca Empire, it would also in time become a blow to Inca culture. In regards to the execution of Atahualpa, Francisco Pizarro had the following to say, quote,
"The prudence, fortitude, military discipline, labors, perilous navigations, and battles of the Spaniards will cause great joy to the faithful and terror to the infidels. For this reason and for God our Lord and for the services of the Catholic Imperial Majesty, it will be the glory of God because they conquered and brought to our holy Catholic faith so vast a number of heathens." The Spaniards who chronicled the death of Atahualpa fit this sort of imperial Spanish narrative. In their writings, Atahualpa's execution was the first Inca conversion. It was a founding act that a new Spanish province would be built upon. Pizarro's descriptions of his conquest of the Inca fit the similar pattern of Hernán Cortés's descriptions whenever Cortés took the Aztec capital city. Pizarro, like Cortés, gave their descriptions of events a religious tint. Victory over the Inca was apparently proof that God chose Spain to spread Christian ideas and to build God's earthly kingdom. Moreover, in the wake of the Protestant Reformation, when Protestants criticized and broke away from the Catholic Church, Catholics and Protestants accused each other of heresy. The religious narrative of stories of Spanish conquest were meant to unify Christians back into a single church. We should be fighting those heretical emperors and their pagan armies. In addition, the gold pillaged from the American peoples could be used to fund a new crusade against the Ottoman Empire. But this was not simply a narrative meant to facilitate political goals. I mean, it was that, but it was also more. It was a justification for imperial occupation. The emphasis of the non-Christian nature of the indigenous Americans created an impetus, a motivation, a reason to stay in the American hemisphere. Accusations of American idolatry and demon worship supported a program of religious conversion, that is, of cultural transformation. Now, in order to become Christians, the Native Americans first needed to become civilized peoples. And the Spanish made numerous comparisons to the ancient Greeks and Romans to illustrate this point. Now, the classical Greco-Roman ideas and their influence on the modern era has been a consistent theme throughout American libertas. And indeed, it was the same in regards to the conquest of the Inca. As we have seen, the Romans united a diversity of peoples under a single empire, a position Spain now found itself in. Thus, the Roman Empire became seen as a prototype of the Spanish Empire, and moreover, just as how the ancient inhabitants of Iberia were incorporated into a rising empire across the water, so too were the inhabitants of Peru, also in the process of being incorporated into a rising empire, also across the water. Let's take, for example, the works of Pedro Cieza de León. He was around 13 to 14 years old when he saw the arrival of Inca treasure in 1534. Like sharks who sensed the smell of blood, the war trophies of Spain's conquest and promises of future imperial glory were enough to motivate him to join the numerous Spaniards who set out to conquer the native empire. Pedro Cieza de León wrote a history entitled The Chronicle of Peru, where he blended his observations of the Inca with his cultural background of Christianity and the classical history of the Greeks and the Romans. Like other Spaniards who compared the Mexica and Maya to the ancient Romans, Cieza made numerous comparisons between the Inca and the Romans. He compared the Inca dynastic struggles to the Roman civil wars between Caesar and Pompey. Cieza's knowledge of Roman history was the reason he recognized the Inca as a legitimate and worthy imperial state. Cieza repeatedly used Roman comparisons when describing the Inca Empire, especially when it came to the Inca road system. He was so impressed by Inca infrastructure that he considered the Inca road system in many ways to be superior to the Roman road system that they used in the province of Hispania, which was then Spain. Yet the parallels Cieza made were not only classical and positive. He also employed the same language, vocabulary, and concepts to describe the Inca as demon worshippers. Throughout his work, he labeled the Inca gods to be demons and devils. The literal demonization of Inca culture served to justify its extirpation, its removal. This was a necessary step, he believed, for the salvation of their souls. But moreover, the embrace of Greco-Roman Christian civilization meant that they could rise to the full potential of their humanity. Cieza considered the Spanish conquest to be a great victory over idolatry and therefore a triumph for the Roman Catholic faith. Eventually, like in Mexico and the Yucatan, the Spanish followed their political conquest with a spiritual conquest, a cultural conquest. They decided to exorcise the pagan belief system of the Inca. The Spanish mass exorcism of the Inca follows similar patterns used against other peoples, as we have seen with the Mexica and the Maya. Amongst the earliest sites to be exorcised was the most holy temple of the Inca religion, Coricancha. In 1533, the Spanish destroyed the sacred temple. And just like how the statue of Saint Janus was used for the tomb of the Christian Saint James in the myth of Santiago's journey, and just as how the remains of the Mexica Templo Mayor were used for the Mexico City Metropolitan Cathedral, so too were the remains of Coricancha used to build the Catholic convent of Santo Domingo. This was a process of eradicating the supposed enemy culture and replacing it with a supposedly superior Christian Spanish culture. A process that was perpetuated by friars such as Diego Ortiz. Ortiz and another friar, Marcos Garcia, were amongst the only Europeans attempting to spread Christianity in the Inca province of Vilcabamba in the early 1570s. Like with the Mexica and the Maya, this involved a large amount of violence. Violence being the behavior involving physical force intended to hurt, damage, or kill someone or something. In the Spanish conquest of the Inca, violence was the main means of communication between the Spanish and the Inca. The Spanish chronicles told how the Inca beheaded the Spaniards. During Manco's last stand for the Inca people, Cieza de Leon wrote how Manco's troops killed a group of Spaniards, beheaded them, and sent their heads to other Inca leaders to demonstrate that the Spanish bleed and therefore they could be kicked out. But Manco also inflicted violence against other Inca. The Inca interpreters, collaborators, and traders who helped the Spanish had their hands cut off, they had their noses cut off, and some even had their eyes gouged out. The message was clear. This is what happens to those of you who help the Spanish. But Pizarro also responded in kind. When his troops captured Andean forces, he ordered their right hands to be cut off. The message here was also clear. This is what happens when you resist the Spanish. Now, for the Spanish and Inca, mutilation was nothing out of the ordinary. Before the arrival of the Europeans, the Andean peoples used beheading and mutilation. The Andean people's use of beheading and mutilation is affirmed in various cultural artifacts such as scenes in pottery or cloth. Likewise, in Spain, the punishment for theft was frequently punished by cutting off the perpetrator's hands, feet, ears, and even noses. Moreover, when the rebel leader Diego de Almagro was captured on the battlefield in 1538, Pizarro took him to Cusco. There, Almagro was executed, and Pizarro ordered his dead body to be beheaded. Violence became an instrumental part of the conversion program once the Spanish took over. The Spanish faced difficulties in studying Inca concepts and in trying to translate Roman Catholic ideas in a way that the Inca would understand them. So the Spanish realized that violence made the learning process just a little bit faster. And we could see some of these punishments outlined in the Councils of Lima, which were Roman Catholic gatherings meant to organize the evangelization process. Because the Inca practiced mummification, flogging was a punishment for the Inca whenever they disinterred the bodies of their loved ones and moved them to another location. There was also punishments for those Inca who were baptized but still did not go to Mass. and punishments were stipulated to those Inca who still went to the religious shamans of their faith. But it was not only mutilation and torture. There was also a lot of fire. Now, for some context, burning at the stake was the medieval European go-to favorite for executing individuals falling outside what they defined as mainstream Christian beliefs. As one historian put it, medieval theologians, writers, and thinkers believed society was bound together by the love of God. This love was like a fire, melting individuals together into one whole. Those who did not burn one way had to burn in another. Those who did not spiritually burn with God's love were destined to burn literally in the fires of hell or purgatory. Thus, fire could unify us together with a burning love, a process of inclusion. Or fire could exclude us, punish us, and condemn us. Burning was a common punishment for the most severe crimes and sins. Transgressions against the authority of the monarchy or of God was frequently met with death at the stake. It was the go-to punishment for heretics and those who committed what they believed to be abnormal sexual acts. But burning was also used for much lesser crimes, for example, counterfeiting. And initially, fire was a punishment frequently used during Spain's conquest of the Inca. Whenever the captain Francisco de Chaves sought to avenge his fallen Spanish comrades, he ordered a number of Andía peoples to be impaled and burned at the stake. One Spaniard, a Luis de Morales, wrote of an instance in 1541 where conquistadors used execution by fire to simply rob some Inca. But fire had to be thought out in the American context. It had to be reconsidered. The Spanish realized they couldn't simply apply their European punishments on American peoples. The Spanish had to adapt to Inca culture in an attempt to convert them to Christianity. And this was because of how fire was seen in Inca culture from their perspective. The Inca believed that the incineration of one's body meant the extermination of their soul. Thus, burning an Inca was one of the worst things you could possibly do to another Inca. It was the ultimate insult and dishonor. The Spanish could not win hearts and minds with fire. Part of converting the Inca into Christians involved the intimate study of their culture. Only by studying their concepts could you develop means to eradicate their culture. And indeed, the Spanish learned why the Inca saw incineration as the most severe dishonor one could do. Turns out that the bodies of the dead were sacred objects. This is because the people of the Andes believed that the world and everything in it was animated by a vital force. This vital force was known as Camac or Camaquen. This Camac or Camaquen resided in ordinary objects, but because the Camac resided in such an object, it was no longer ordinary. It was known as a Huaca. A Huaca being an object hosting the vital force known as Camac. The word Huaca is a generic term for any person, place, or thing with a sacred or supernatural association. For the Inca, it embodied a sense of holiness. Often these were places such as mountain peaks or certain rocks. These rocks usually had some striking natural and beautiful features, such as their size, shape, or location in a given landscape. Sometimes the Inca emphasized their sacredness. If it was a tree or rock, for example, it would be carved with beauty and elegance. Now, the Inca also believed that these sacred objects could communicate with humans and also shape the lives of humans. This was not a language that any mere mortal could understand. Rather, only the deity's priests could understand and translate such knowledge into human speech. As a result, Huacas were worshipped with prayers and sacrifices. And in the Inca realm, Huacas were virtually everywhere. Moreover, Huacas were intimately tied to ancestral worship in Inca culture. In the Inca language, the word Vilca was a term that could mean great-grandfather and great-grandson, or it could also mean ancestor or descendant. The term could also be used as a synonym for Huaca. And keep in mind that Huacas were explicitly identified with Inca ancestors. Now, the lines between mere physical objects and ancestors were extremely blurred. Recall in the previous episode how the Inca believed that their creator god Viracocha created men and women from stone. Indeed, many Inca believed that the main shrines around Cusco were the ancestral forerunners of the Inca who had been transformed into stone. Now, for the Spanish, these beliefs were problematic. A central aspect of 16th century Christianity is the belief that there is a fundamental difference between humanity and animals. According to the biblical book of Genesis, God gave mankind dominion over animals. According to this strain of thought, animals were not the equal of humans. Nonetheless, the Spanish argued that the Inca concept of Camac was a parallel to the Christian concept of the soul. Thus, the Inca were on the right track, just a little off base, the Spanish believed. In order to fix this misunderstanding, the Spanish attempted to eradicate the worship of Huacas. Diego Ortiz led a program of iconoclasm against these indigenous religious sites. This included exorcism by fire. Ortiz and Garcia led a group of recently converted Inca to the great shrine of Chuquipalta. Spanish chroniclers reported that the shrine of Chuquipalta was a temple of the sun. Some scholars associated the sun temple with the sun god Punchao, also known as Inti. Inti, the sun god, was the patron of the Inca Empire, protector of the Inca people. And many Inca believed that they and their rulers descended from Inti. Scholars also believe that the statue of Punchao contained the remains of previous Inca rulers, specifically their hearts. Moreover, at the very center of the temple laid Yurok Rumi, a sacred white rock. Moreover, the Inca and friars believed that the site served as an oracle that spoke to the Inca, that communicated messages to the Inca. In the Spanish imagination, seeking oracles was the heretical practice of divination, that is, seeking supernatural knowledge or knowledge about the future. And the Spanish therefore considered the Huaca to be a demon who spoke to the Inca, and sometimes also manifested itself into material reality there. The Augustinian friar, Bernardo de Torres, wrote that Paranti was a name for the demon, quote, who answered the Indians at a white rock from which flowed a spring near the town of Vircos, unquote. Moreover, the motivation to exterminate the Inca religion was also political. The rebel leader of the anti-imperial resistance movement at Vilcabamba regularly conversed with the statue of Punchao and sought guidance on how to liberate his people from Spanish imperial rule. Therefore, destroying the religious site would not only serve Spain's interest of converting the people here to Christianity and spreading Western civilization, but it would also be a blow to the resistance movement and therefore prevent a revolution. After all, the images and relics of the most famous Inca emperors were routinely exhibited at the sacred site of Yurok Rumi. Control over Huacas such as these served to legitimize Inca leaders and give Inca leaders power and authority that they could use to fuel a resistance movement against the Spanish. It was for these reasons that Diego Ortiz incinerated the shrine, exorcising the rock in the process. And this was an act which provoked considerable hostility and anger from the Inca people. One Spanish witness wrote over how the Spanish, quote, destroyed many sanctuaries from which devils were seen to come out, unable to resist the prayers, exhortations, and exorcisms offered up by the said father, and fumigations with which he tormented and afflicted them, unquote. Now, in the process of destroying Inca culture, the friars used suffumigations, and suffumigations were a routine part of many exorcist rites in Europe. Suffumigations were believed to be a magical mixture of herbs and fragrances used to smoke out evil spirits. And Ortiz's practice predated the recommended use of suffumigations in the book known as the Flagellum Demonum, written in 1577. But it was not enough to simply destroy rocks and temples. the Spanish had to tackle the ancestral worship of mummies. Keep in mind that the bodies of the dead, along with their tombs, were known as Huacas. Being the descendants of Inti meant that the human body was a corporeal manifestation of Inti's divinity. Therefore, the bodies of kings and other ancestors were tangible and direct links between the Inca people and their gods. To preserve this connection to their sublime world of spirituality, the Inca had to maintain the dead bodies of their ancestors for all eternity. The conquistadors' first contacts with these types of Huacas was when they looted Inca temples and found the Inca mummies therein. There is a story within a Spanish chronicle that tells of a band of soldiers who reached Cajamarca. There they walked into the temple to see the mummified bodies of Inca nobles being carefully maintained by a woman in a beautiful gold mask. She diligently used a delicate brush to brush the dust away from the mummies, and angrily ordered the Spanish to remove their shoes in such a holy place. But of course, the Spanish proceeded to pillage the temple, and the Spanish came to realize that wherever there were mummies, there was also gold. Therefore, the search for Inca mummies became widespread and feverish. In 1540, the Spaniard Luis de Morales wrote a letter to Charles V and complained that the Spanish, quote, burned the living and dug up the dead, unquote. But from the eyes of the Spanish missionaries, it was a good thing that they were searching for and destroying the mummies and tombs. After all, these Huacas were a serious hindrance to the spread of Christianity. Look at that. Greedy bastards and pious men of God can indeed work together for the greater good of humanity they led themselves to believe. But it's important to say that not all Spaniards believed this. The Friar Bartholomew de las Casas urged the Spanish to respect the culture of the Inca. That the gold and treasure the Inca buried with their dead was meant to honor their dead. It was not free loot that the Spaniards could pillage at will. And therefore, it was not gold the conquistadors found, but rather gold the conquistadors stole. And therefore, Las Casas argued that the plundering of Inca gold was a sin that was punishable by eternal damnation in hell. But not everyone agreed with Las Casas. The viceroy, Francisco de Toledo, he committed the Spanish to the total destruction of Inca Huacas, believing the looting of these tombs would be a boost and gain for the empire and therefore also for God. Eventually, Las Casas' writings were banned and the hunt for Inca tombs intensified. And the efforts of the Inca to preserve their faith also intensified. They risked being burned alive just to protect their ancestors. But the Spanish also ensured that in death, the Inca could not escape. They had to be there at the end of an Inca's life to ensure that their God properly received the Inca soul. It was generally acknowledged amongst Christians at this time that the moment of death was the most dangerous time for the pious. This was the exact moment that the devil would try to take possession of one's soul, by tempting one to resist one's fate, reject pain, and hold fast to the world. For this reason, in Christianity, it was important that priests accompany the dying, to help the dying in the difficult struggle with evil. It is to be noted that whenever the Spanish encountered the Inca, sorcerers were added to the figure of the devil as enemies lying in wait for the dying. This is important because in Europe, the Spanish did not need to admonish one to reject sorcerers, only the devil. They used sorcerers in Peru in order to try to explain Christian doctrine one last time at the moment of death. Like, keep in mind that gods you see while dying, the ones that come from your culture, the sorcerers, it's the devil, watch out. But this addition of the word sorcerer indicates the church's determination to adapt to America, but also their dedication to combat indigenous Andean religious beliefs. Now, all of these were somewhat acceptable to the Inca. At a certain level, the Inca just wanted to move on with their lives. They had faced endless years of war between themselves and now, against the Spanish, they just wanted everything to be peaceful. Although the destruction of the sun god's temple angered the Inca, it was not until the mysterious death of one of their leaders that the Inca decided to act. The Inca blamed Diego Ortiz and killed him. But this did not stop the Spanish policy of exorcism. The 1570s witnessed the arrival of the Inquisition to Peru. As elsewhere, the Lima Inquisition was tasked with exterminating sorcery, witchcraft, necromancy, and divination. The Lima Inquisition also took under its control the publication and circulation of books to try to control the spread of ideas and ensure that no heretical beliefs developed. They described the native Inca healers still loyal to their old gods as, quote, evil sorcerers, unquote. And countless vulnerable Inca were swept up in this inquisitorial purge. Usually those accused by the Inquisition belonged to the lowest people of society, the poorest people of society, the most vulnerable people of society, people who did not have the connections or wealth to defend themselves. In the same decade of the 1570s, another tribunal, the extirpation of idolatries, was established, and the goal here was to completely and definitively root out the worship of the old gods.
Hey guys, I just want to thank you all for watching my video, and I hope to see you guys again real soon. Ciao.